Pause.
Amazing. And let me go here for a second. Okay. Hi, Ruth. Welcome. Just trying.
Hello, Diamond. Good evening.
Hello, Jonathan. No, that's not right. Sorry, everybody. I'm just trying to. I'm not at home. We lost our internet connection on Monday, so I'm at my son's house. I'm in his study, trying to sort of figure this out on his computer, and I think that he may have some different settings than I do. But be that as it may, we're going to continue. Hopefully, everything will go well. So, welcome everybody. I don't see Harold and Rosalie here tonight. The reason I'm mentioning their names specifically is because they are sponsoring the class tonight. So I wanted to thank them, 1 second, for sponsoring in memory the yahrzeit of Harold's dad, Abraham Schwartz, Zichrono Livracha. So may his neshama have an aliyah, and may their family be blessed with long life and good health. So we have two parsha to talk about, Acharei Mot and Kedoshim. So it's a lot, and we're going to obviously try to select a little bit from each parsha, hopefully things that have some substance to them. As you know, sometimes the things that I pick are a little bit off the beaten trail, but that's good. So I want to start with the very beginning of Parshat Acharei Mot. Parshat Acharei Mot begins essentially with a discussion of Yom Kippur. And this reading, this section in the Chumash, constitutes the Kriyat Torah on Yom Kippur. And that's because the whole first part describes the ritual that Aaron HaKohen had to follow, and then subsequent to him, all Kohen Gadol had to follow on Yom Kippur. So that's not obvious if you take a look at the language of the Psukim, meaning if you start reading at the beginning of Parshat Acharei Mot, and you say, well, I don't see the word Yom Kippur mentioned anywhere here. I see the word maybe kapara. Is that the indication? So the truth is that Chazal learned that out from Pasuk Bet. So I want to read Pasuk Bet to you. You can have a Chumash or not, as you know. I'm going to read it out loud anyways. Vayom Hashem el Moshe, daber el Aaron achicha, ve'al yavo b'chol eit el hakodesh mi beit laparochet el pnei hakaporet asher al ha'aron ve'lo yamut ki be'anan eira'eh al hakaporet. Reading from the stone interpretation. And Hashem said to Moshe, speak to Aaron your brother. He shall not come at all times into the sanctuary, within the curtain, in front of the cover that is upon the ark, so that he shall not die. For in a cloud will I appear upon the ark cover. So some really strict guidelines as far as putting down for Aaron HaKohen that he should know that he does not have 24/7 access to the Kodesh HaKodeshim. Not true for Moshe Rabbeinu, but it is true for everybody else. There seems to be some sort of protocol that needs to be followed, and that protocol is listed in Parshat Acharei Mot. So when talking about this idea for in a cloud I will appear to him, Rashi offers the following. Rashi quotes a Gemara in Masechet Yoma, which is the tractate which deals extensively with the laws of Yom Kippur. And there, the Chachamim explain, V'al yavo, he should not come because in a cloud I will appear, Ki'im be'anan ha'ktoret be'yom ha'kippurim. Because part of the service that is described in this parsha that Aaron HaKohen or any other Kohen Gadol was obligated to fulfill on Yom Kippur was he had to take the incense pan, the Ktoret, and he had to bring it into the Kodesh HaKodeshim. And when you put the incense on the coals that were at the bottom of this pan, it created, as we know, like the smoke cloud of the incense. Well, that's the cloud that Hashem says, but that's the service that took place on Yom Kippur. So the Chachamim are saying, well, this service then obviously has to do with Yom Kippur. And it's only on Yom Kippur, although I must mention that the Vilna Gaon had a fascinating difference of opinion about how to understand this. So while Rashi and other Meforshim and other explanations suggest that the ritual included in the beginning part of Parsha Acharei, the details what Aaron, a Kohen, or any Kohen Gadol had to do in Yom Kippur. Vilna Gaon says, no, that's not it. Anytime that the Kohen Gadol wanted to go into the Kodesh HaKodeshim, he could do so as long as he followed this protocol, not just in Yom Kippur. So whereas I think that's not the most common opinion and understanding the Psukim, that's the Vilna Gaon Shita, but that's different than most other opinions. But let's go back to one idea here that I think is critical. This idea of not being able to go into the Kodesh HaKodeshim, why is that? What's behind that? Like, when we think about our relationship to God, would it be better if we had an open door policy? Would we want to have a relationship that made it possible for the Kohen Gadol to enter anytime? Yes, the Vilna Gaon says he has to, but here's the protocol. But is there a reason for that? So I want to read the other part of this very same Rashi. So Rashi tries to understand, so why the restriction of access? Ki tamid ani nireh sham im amud anani. So Rashi says, well, because Hashem's presence is always there inside the Kodesh HaKodeshim, on top of the Aron Kodesh, on top of the Aron Ha'idu. Ulefi shegalui shchinati sham, and since my presence, the Shechina, is perpetually revealed there, Yizeher shelo yargil lavo. He should be careful, and these two words are important, shelo yargil, that he shouldn't become, interesting, the word Hebrew sounds so much like the English, ragil, regular. He should not take for granted that he can come anytime he wants. It should not be a common occurrence for you, the Kohen, to think you can go in anytime. So it seems clear from this Gemara that Rashi quotes as the explanation is that too much access is a problem. God's presence is there, and you just can't walk in because that's where God is. So leaving aside this whole notion of Yom Kippur and the proper protocol and all the various ritualistic performances and observances that were connected to Yom Kippur, I think the notion here that's worthy of just thinking a couple minutes about is that is restricted access a limitation or an enhancement? Let me explain. There's an interesting Midrash Tanchum and Parsha Miketz, in which the students of Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi ask Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi an interesting question. And what's the question? Can we daven more than 3 times a day? Is that a bad thing? So there's a couple of opinions. Somebody else besides Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, whose name escapes me, said, halavai, if only people wanted to daven more. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine your kids saying, Mom, I'm sorry, I just can't help with the dishes. I got to go daven. And like more times in the day you want to go daven? That's great. That would be amazing. Is that really a demonstration of your willingness to get closer and closer to God? Who would not encourage that? But Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi had a very different answer. Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi said, no, I don't want more than 3 times. It has to be 3 times. Why? Because if you allow a person to daven more than 3 times, then he won't feel obligated to invest whatever emotional awareness and spiritual energy for those 3 times, because he'll always think he has another shot at it. Meaning that sometimes over familiarity does not bring about the results that you would anticipate. You may think that davening more is a way of strengthening davening, but in fact, it may be a strategy to accomplish the exact opposite. Doing something too many times, being so exposed to something too much, doesn't necessarily mean that you will be more attached to it or value it more. It can, in fact, I think as the English phrase is, oh my God, it just skipped my mind, which is familiarity breeds contempt. As opposed to fondness makes the heart grow stronger. I think that's the phrase. So here, Rashi seems to be indicating that that's what Hashem is saying. I don't want you to come into the Kodesh HaKodeshim. That's where I, as it were, reside. And I don't want you to feel that you can just casually have a conversation with me. Being in the presence of God requires some sort of preparation. Being in the presence of God means you need to understand the nature of that relationship. And this is so different, I think, in some of the classical Hasidic perspectives, which encourage person to treat God as like he's there all the time and you can talk anytime you want, which is true. I can't daven more than 3 times a day. Shachri, Mincha, Marav are the 3 times, and Shabbos it's Musaf. That's it. I can have conversations with God, as Nachman Bratzlav would often suggest. He was the one who promoted the notion of Hidbodedut. Go into the forest, close your eyes, just talk to God. Talk to God in a monologue, exactly like you would talk to a friend. That's the way you should be speaking to the Rebbeinu Shalom. That's how he understood it. Whereas this Rashi seems to be saying, maybe that's okay in the forest, but it's definitely not okay in the Kodesh HaKodeshim. So just extrapolating a little, and I'm not going to make any major comments here. So what's the attitude about shul? What attitude would you think is the proper attitude to develop towards shul? Should we adapt the implication perhaps of Rashi? No, it's don't get too comfortable. Or no, make shul as comfortable as you possibly can. Now I'm going to tell you honestly, as an educator and as a father and as a grandfather and as a rabbi in a shul that has Baruch Hashem, beautiful, beautiful families and amazing children. Should children be allowed to run around in shuls? What do you think? Is that an enhancement or not? Is it making shul is it bringing the kids closer to Hashem or not? And is the goal for us to sort of educate our children to feel what when you walk into shul? Reverence or comfort? It's an interesting question. And I don't think you're going to have unanimous opinions about that. And I can see on a regular Shabbos how some parents want their kids to feel that shul is a home away from home. Baruch Hashem that there's so many young families who want that. But the idea of how you treat the shul, how you morat mikdash, which is a concept in and of itself, how you show reverence to the mikdash, to the Beit HaMikdash, is an interesting question. How do you accomplish it? I'm raising that. I'm not making any, I'm not saying any more than that. Okay, let's move on to the next thing. Continuing on in this parak where Hashem is describing the nature of the avoda that Aaron HaKohen had to do on Yom Kippur, and Pasuk in chapter 16, Pasuk Yud Zayin, I want to read this to you. It says the following: V'chol Adam lo yihiyeh ba'ohel mo'ed b'va'ol lechaper b'kodesh ad seito v'chiper ba'ado uva'ad beito uva'ad kol kahal Yisrael. Reading again. Any person shall not be in the tent of meeting when he comes to provide atonement in the sanctuary until his departure. He shall provide atonement for himself, for his household, and for the entire congregation of Israel. The point in this pasuk that I want to just reflect on with you is that the Kohen Gadol had to be alone when he went into the Kodesh HaKodeshim. He had to be alone. So let's think about that. Why? Why should he be alone? Wouldn't it be better if other people were there? So we have a concept, in fact, in halacha called Berov Am Hadrat Melech. I don't know if you've heard that. Berov Am Hadrat Melech. What does Berov Am Hadrat Melech mean? And it's actually a Mishnah, it's a pasuk in Sefer Mishlei, the book of Proverbs, by Shlomo Melech, that the majesty of God is increased amongst the multitudes. Berov Am, when there's multitudes, Hadrat Melech, that's where you'll find the greatness, the majesty of God. Meaning, doing things in larger groups brings a greater degree of Kiddush Hashem and a greater majesty to the presence of God. So, for example, what would be better, according to this idea, to have 10 minyanim going on at the same time in different rooms at the shul, or bring all those people together into the main shul and let's all daven mincha together, one big mincha, berovam, which is better? So this pasuk in Mishlei generally says that it's better to have everybody together, that the presence of people increases the majesty of God. But the Torah is very specific when it comes to Yom Kippur to tell a Kohen Gadol, but you can't be with anybody. Nobody should be there. So there's a little bit of a conflict that why not? If more people went with the Kohen, I mean, let's say everybody prepared themselves. I get that. They had to be tahor, whatever that is. But wouldn't the presence of more people increase the majesty of God? That they all come out having been together, and you just can imagine the conversation that would have happened. Oh my gosh, all the amazing things that people go on to describe to their families, to their communities, to their shuls, to their neighborhoods. Awesome. But that's not the case. So sometimes, apparently, being alone is the right way. You know, there's a pasuk in Micha, that sometimes a modest approach. What does modest mean? You're private. You're not out there. You're doing something more modestly, privately, in a more reserved manner, not just reserved in the way in which you speak, but actually more insulated manner. So why is that? It's also true not just for the service of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur. The Rambam in Hilchos Talmud Torah makes a fascinating statement, which might even seem counterintuitive. I think we pretty well understand how, within Jewish tradition, the study of Torah occupies a really critical place. Obviously, studying Torah means we know what God's will is. Studying Torah gives us the opportunity, as it were, to have this ongoing relationship and communication. What do you want? If you went out on a date with somebody whom you loved, you'd have conversation. What's important to you? What do you like? What do you not like? Ask them questions. So Hashem is having a conversation with us. Here's my book. You want to know about me? Read the things that I think are important. So that's what we do. We read Hashem's Torah. It's one of our ways of developing the relationship. So reading from the Sefer, the Mishnah Torah, Hilchot Talmud Torah, listen to what the Rambam says. This is Perek Gimel. Af al pi shemitzvah lilmod bayom ubalayla. Even though there really is a mitzvah to learn Torah when? Bayom ubalayla, or 24/7, during the daytime and during the nighttime. Yes, we learn Torah morning, noon, and night. That's what it is. It's not compartmentalized. It's now 11 o'clock, time to shut your books. We don't learn Torah at night. No, that's not it. He goes on. Ein adam lamed rov chochmato ela b'layla. The Rambam says, to be honest, he says, a person learns most of the knowledge that he gains from studying when he studies at night, not at the day, at night. Lefichach, therefore, whoever wishes to merit the crown of Torah, yizaher kol leilotav, he should be careful and cautious that for all his nights, lo yovad afilu echad mehem, he shouldn't lose even one of them. V'shena v'achila v'shtiyah, he should not lose one night with sitting around and sleeping and eating and drinking. It doesn't mean that if you're thirsty, you shouldn't drink. He's saying the nighttime is not a time for these sorts of sitting around, having a long meal, having some drinks. No, that's not what you should be doing at the night. Ella b'talmud Torah v'divrei chokhmah. That's what a person should be doing. But why? So listen to the reason. Because most people aren't awake at night. That's true. Most people aren't awake. Most people aren't awake. That's right. Most people aren't awake at night, which means that if you're studying Torah, it's not to impress anybody else. You're not looking over your shoulder. Who's looking at me? Did they see that I was here? Like, did the rabbi notice that I was coming in? And does he see me sitting here? There's nobody there in the room. It's me. It's just me. I'm learning. I'm learning at night. Does that really count? Rambam says, does it count? That's actually the best time to learn. Why? Because your motive is so pure. It's not for anybody else. You're there at night when everybody else is sleeping. Maybe other people even in your home are sleeping. Now, I don't think it's possible for all of us to stay up all night. I don't think that's what the Rambam is saying. In fact, elsewhere, the Rambam tells us that if you go and have a good night's sleep in order to wake up in the morning stronger and more ready to fulfill a day worth filled with mitzvahs, then sleeping is in and of itself a mitzvah. You're fulfilling God's will. Why? Because you're preparing yourself to do all the things that Hashem wants from you during the next day. So sleeping in and of itself is not a bad thing. So we do need sleep. So he's not saying that. What I think he is saying is that for too many of us, we see ourselves connected to daytime as learning. That's when we learn. Daytime. What's the nighttime? Entertainment, relaxation. There's nothing wrong with relaxing, but learning doesn't take place at night. And the truth of the matter is that's not actually the classic way. That's certainly not the way in yeshiva. In yeshiva, of course, for those of you who have been there, sent your sons, or had the opportunity to read about it, the day and the nighttime are learning time. And you have what's called night seder, which is the time that you get back, you go into the Beit Midrash with your learning partner, if you can, and you're studying. Now, I understand that the context of this conversation is that the Kohen Gadol had to learn by himself. I had to go into the Aron Kodesh, had to go into the Kodesh Kodeshim by himself. But the point is that sometimes doing things by yourself is critical. And sometimes nighttime is a valuable opportunity for all of us to sort of separate from the distractions, take a deep breath, and to think things through. I know for many of us, we're tired and we have to go to sleep, but setting aside some time for Torah thought in the evening may be a good ritual. It may be something that's worth doing, not hours and hours, but imagine if we all said, you know what, I'm going to try this. So I know I'm going to go to bed. I don't know whatever time you go to bed, 10 o'clock, 10:30, whatever it is. So how about the 20 minutes before I go to bed and start my evening routine, whatever it is to get ready for bed, let me just sit for a second. Maybe you'll open up a sefer. Obviously, it's not going to be something that you're going to have to really struggle with. Or maybe you're going to think about Torah. Maybe you're going to listen to Dvar Torah on your phone. Maybe you're going to watch a YouTube video about Torah at night. So I make the study of Torah at night part of my routine. It's not something that I think is always done, but it's something to consider. Okay, I want to continue moving on in Parsha Acharei Mot. I'm going to skip to Perek Yud Chet, which is 18th chapter. Okay. So 18th chapter in Parshat Acharei Mot can be somewhat provocative. It's provocative because of its content. And much of Perek Yud Chet is really a discussion of sexual morality or sexual immorality that we need to distance ourselves from. So I want to begin reading Perek Yud Chet. Hashem spoke to Moshe, saying, Daber b'nei Yisrael v'marta alehem. Speak to b'nei Yisrael and say to them, Ani Hashem Elokeichem, I am Hashem your God. K'maaseh eretz Mitzrayim asher yeshavtem ba lo ta'asu. Do not perform the practice of the land of Egypt in which you dwelled, and do not perform the practice of the land of Canaan to which I bring you, and do not follow their traditions. Carry out my laws and safeguard my decrees to follow them. I'm Hashem your God. You shall observe my decrees and my laws, which man shall carry out and by which he shall live. I am Hashem. And then you have a series of sexual relations which Hashem identifies, the Torah identifies as being inappropriate. Okay, so I want to share with you a couple of perspectives on this, which I hope you'll find interesting as I did. So you shall not copy the practices of the land of Egypt where you dwelt, or the land of Canaan to which I'm taking you. Don't follow their practices. Do not do anything that they did. So Rashi here quotes the halachic midrashic collection called Torah Kohanim. And this is what Rashi says. I'm not going to read the Hebrew. I'm just going to paraphrase. Rashi says that this verse, don't do this, don't practice, don't imitate them, don't imitate the Canaanim where you're going to go. This shows that the practices of Egypt and Canaan were more corrupt than those of any other nation. And the place where they dwelt was more corrupt than anywhere else. I mean, that's how it seems to be the pshat, right? Don't imitate what you saw in Egypt. Now I'm taking you to Eretz Canaan, and you're going to see a lot of stuff there, but don't imitate any of the things there. So the fact that Hashem emphasizes Eretz Mitzrayim and he emphasizes Eretz Canaan leads us to believe that those two places have to be worse than anywhere else. Okay, Rabbi Ephraim Lornshitz, otherwise known by the name of the Sefer, his commentary called the Kli Yakar on Chumash, in his commentary, raises a couple of difficulties and problems which he feels Rashi's comment doesn't really address. So this is what he says. The Kli Yakar, Rabbi Lornshitz suggests, well, B'nai Yisrael, just think about it, were not forced to live in the Egyptian district in Egypt. Remember when the story of their coming down to Egypt unfolded at the end of Sefer Breshit? Do you remember what Yosef said to his family when they came? I'm going to settle you in the land of Goshen. What was the thinking behind that? Maybe Yosef invented the first notion of Jewish ghettoization, but he did it for a positive purpose. He wanted to separate them from exactly this idea. So if Yosef settled them there, why is the Torah so insistent? Oh my God, that what you saw there, don't do. Well, they didn't maybe see it as much as we think they did, according to the Kli Yakar. So shouldn't we assume that Yosef would have chosen a region which was safe for his brothers, his family, his father? So in addition to which, says the Kli Yakar, the fact that these verses single out Egyptian and Canaan and Eretz Canaan proves that their conduct was the most corrupt. And had their practices been less depraved than those of other peoples, God would not have singled them out. But the Kli Yakar argues, logic, this is what he thinks, Kli Yakar thinks this, logic would seem to suggest that the precise opposite, that Hashem would emphasize the need for Bnei Israel to distance themselves from the practices that are less displeasing. So what is Rashi thinking here? Does Rashi mean to imply that Bnei Israel did not need to refrain from the practices of other nations? Just Egypt? Just Canaan? Like the world is populated by a lot of idolaters. What, they were all like holy people? Of course not. So why did the Torah say these two, and why didn't it not say, keep yourselves holy, follow my laws, as opposed to, okay, keep away from Egyptian customs, keep away from Canaanite customs? So the fact that those two are outlined specifically, the Kli Yakar struggles with the answer. So he comes up with what I think is a not intuitive explanation. The Kli Yakar claims to the opposite, the contrary, that Egypt and Canaan lived at a higher moral and ethical standard than other pagan nations. Did you hear that? They lived at a higher level, not lower, higher. And Hashem therefore specifically warned Bnei Israel against adopting the practices of these nations, which they might believe are acceptable. Why? Because they're superior to others. Look, these two people are better. They've risen more than the other nations of the world. So that's a good thing, isn't it? To try to emulate those who have risen above the lowest level. Oh, that's worthy of connecting yourself to that. So the Kli Yakar has a completely different perspective, thinking they may not have been tzaddikim, but they certainly weren't the worst of the worst, which Rashi seems to suggest that was the pshat of the pasuk. I want to take you in a different direction that from the Kli Yakar. Rabbi Norman Lamb, I hope that's a name that's familiar to everybody. The late Rabbi Dr. Norman Lamb he occupied two really, really important positions in his life. One, he was, maybe three, he was one of the most beloved Talmidim of Rabbi Yosef Dov Halevi Soloveitchik, Zecher Tzadik Livrocha. He was a beloved student of the Rav. He also was the rabbi at the Jewish Center in Manhattan for many years. And then he transitioned to be the president of Yeshiva University. And he was the one, I think, Rabbi Norman Lamb, who articulated, certainly amongst the first, those who articulated what modern orthodoxy, centrist orthodoxy represented. But his drashas, while he was a rabbi in the position of rabbi at the Jewish Center, were brilliant. And they actually were collected over the years. His drashas were collected, put online. It's an open, anybody can actually access his collection. And I think the best of the best were actually collected and published in a sefer, Drashot Shedarashti, sermons that I delivered, in any event. So in one of the sermons on this week's Parsha, he makes an interesting distinction that I think is important. Now, remember, he was writing in the 1950s and
Hello.
1960s. I don't exactly remember which year.
I'm listening to Rabbi Diamond now.
Okay.
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 Bye.
I just want to, 1 minute. Okay. I don't know what year he wrote this drasha exactly, but the distinction that he made then, I think, is as current and as relevant today. And he asks us to distinguish between two terms, average and normal. What's average and what's normal? And he asks us to do that as a way of understanding, creating the context to understanding the sexual part of this parsha, of this parak, and the notion of sexual immorality. Average is a term that's derived from statistical analysis, right? What's the average? So you add up all the sums, divide by the number of individual cases, and there you have the average. But it's statistics. It's a mathematical result. What's normal? The definition of normal is not mathematical. It's not statistical. It's qualitative and speaks to the notion of a norm, a social norm that's determined by some sort of reference point. So when the Torah lists the various inappropriate sexual relations that it does, what's it listing? Is it listing the way average people would conduct themselves? Or is it listing what's normal? And the reason that I'm saying that is because, especially now, maybe even more than the time that Rabbi Lamb was living in when he said this, he's drawing our attention to what becomes normal. How do we define the word normal? And we live in a time of such relativism that normal somehow has switched from being a qualitative comment that references social norms to what do most people do? That's normal. And people use the word normal to talk about what most people do. Well, that's normal. Why? Because most people are doing it. Because that's the way everybody does it. That's normal. When people do this, like all of the kids this age, that's normal. Or when you watch TV and you watch some of the things that are put on the screen, well, that's normal. Or you take a look at the way women and men relate to each other, you can say, well, that's just what it is now. It's normal. And the Rabbi Lam is saying, no, that's not the Torah's way. What the Torah is saying in this section of sexual morality is that's normal. This is the norm. This is the reference point. This is what it is. For us, these are the reference points. This is what we check to find out what is normal. The Torah is establishing this for us. It's not looking for statistical evidence. It's not asking us to do a study. So how do most people in the city of Toronto, how do most North Americans deal with extramarital affairs? Is it normal? Well, it may be statistically common. Maybe they're high numbers, but do high numbers, a lot of incidents of that, make it normal? And Rabbi Lamb says, no, that's precisely the point of this Parsha, to help us. And we do live in a time where I think what those standards are, those lines are constantly shifting. Like I don't know where everybody stands. I'm going to tell you where I stand. Like, what's the definition of male and of female? What does that mean? What is the definition of male? What's normal? Well, isn't there a single definition? Well, there's a lot of thought, especially in the woke DEI world of today, that no, you can identify yourself as a female or as a male, whether or not biologically that's the case. And that would be considered acceptable. And that should be the definition of a male or a female. And if there are a lot of people who identify that way, does that become normal? Rabbi Lamb is suggesting no, because the Torah is establishing what normal is. And so it's hard. And again, I'm going to put on my educator hat here. When you speak to children and you try to educate them in a fashion that's consistent with Torah philosophy, while we live in a culture which is very contrary to Torah values, it's sometimes hard for the children to understand. So what is normal and what is not normal? What is the reference point to determine what makes something okay? Growing up, maybe those of you who were blessed to raise families, you may remember your kids coming home and saying, Mom and Dad, everybody's doing this. And so you as parents are thinking, well, if everybody's doing it, I guess I should do it too. But that doesn't make it right just because everybody's doing it. Sometimes a lot of people do the wrong things. And so what normal is not established by excuse me, statistical analysis. It has to be established by another authoritative source. And for us, as we know, that's the Torah. And so in his essay on this week's Parsha, he makes I'll just read this one paragraph. This is one of the most fundamental and disastrous errors that anyone can make. In order to remain civilized and prevent our whole society as well as our personal lives from deteriorating to the lowest common denominator, we must understand that there is a tremendous abyss that separates the average from the normal. The average is a description of what is. The normal is the ideal, the principle, what ought to be. It is only in a perfect world that the average is normal. In real life, the average is usually far below the normal. In fact, to be completely normal is very rare indeed. So when we take a look at this reading that's in this Parsha, and you read it, and a lot of what you may see here, you may say, well, you know what? If you take a look at the sexual mores of the time in which we live, some of the things which the Torah explicitly forbids may not seem to be explicitly so wrong in a very permissive sexual society in which we live. Okay, that's that. I want to go a little bit further. So I don't know whether some of you watch your social media, but there's a Hasidic Rav in Israel. His name is Rabbi Gottlieb. I don't know if anybody's ever seen. He speaks only in Hebrew. And sometimes he has really fascinating Divrei Torah, which I think are really insightful. And he has a very calm manner. He's a beautiful voice. He's very warm and he's very engaging. I find he's very engaging. And so I'm jumping now to Parshat Kedoshim. And at the very beginning of Parshat Kedoshim, we find the following, Pasuk Gimel 3. Ish imo va'aviv tira'u ve'et shabtutai tishmoru ani Hashem Elokeichem. Every man, your mother and father shall you revere, and my Sabbaths shall you observe. I am Hashem, your God. So again, taking a look at this verse, you can divide it into maybe three pieces, three sections. Ish imo va'aviv tira'u, part number one. What is that part about? That the Torah is commanding us, children, to have a reverential attitude to our fathers and mothers. Ish, every person, imo va'aviv, your mother and your father, shall you revere. Okay, that's part one. Part two, ve'et shabtutai tishmoru, and you should observe my Sabbaths. Part three, ani Hashem Elokeichem, I am Hashem your God. Part one, reverence to parents. Part two, keeping Shabbos. Part three, I am Hashem your God. So the Torah is a very cleverly crafted book by God. So when you find a pasuk that seems to have disparate themes put next to each other, that's usually a cause for some reflection. Revering your parents, Ishimov Taviv Tirau, and keep Shabbos. Well, they don't naturally flow. I mean, they're both important, clearly. They make sense, and they have reasons to be taught and instructed to the Jewish people. But why put them in one verse next to each other? So this is not my question. This is a question that the Chachamim themselves asked. And so one has to wonder why. And here's Rashi. I'll read the Rashi to you. And Rashi, of course, is not making this up. He's quoting the Divrei Chachamim before him. Samach Shmirat Shabbat Lemora'av, that the Torah deliberately juxtaposed the requirement to keep Shabbos beside the requirement to revere your parents, Yirat Av Ve'em. Why? To teach Lomar, Af al pi shehizarticha al mora'av, even though, says God, I've warned you, I've given you a direct commandment to revere your parents and to listen to what they tell you and not to contradict them and to obey their instructions. I've told you that, says Hashem. I know. Im yomar lecha chalelet Shabbat, but if your parents say to you to do something which would violate Shabbat, al tishmalo, don't listen to your parent. Don't listen to your parent. V'chein bishar kol mitzvot. Not only Shabbat here is sort of like a paradigm for all mitzvot. So what Rashi is saying, or what the Chachamim are saying is that the Torah deliberately put these two mitzvot side by side in order to make sure that we understood the following, that even though it is a positive commandment to respect our parents, to listen to their instructions, to do what they ask us to do, the responsibility to listen to the commandments of God supersedes that. Our parents are also obligated to listen to God. So if our parent asks us to violate Shabbat, we have the right to say, I can't. You and me both have to obey God. You're asking me to violate Hashem's law. I can't obey you now because your request violates Hashem's law, and Hashem's law supersedes a parent's request. Okay. And that, says Rashi, that's what the Chachamim say, is the reason for the juxtaposition. So Rabbi Gottlieb, in his beautiful way, says, this particular situation that's described in this verse probably happens a lot. It certainly happens in families where the children have some sort of spiritual awakening and they become Balei Tshuva and they want to take on more. For them, they want to express themselves with a more observant lifestyle. But mom and dad aren't ready and they don't do that. And so there's tension. So Rabbi Gottlieb says the following. He says two things. We need to see things clearly. We need to use our seichel. We need to sometimes try not to put ourselves in situations which we know are going to bring about difficult moments. And it happens. Sometimes you can avoid it. It's true. Sometimes you can avoid it. Sometimes you can't avoid it, but sometimes you can. Sometimes you know that doing something is likely to lead to a situation where conflict is going to arise. So don't do that. Don't make it hard. Don't make religion the place of division and discord in the family. There's going to be tensions for the people in the family who want to be more observant and people in the family who don't want to be more observant. There's likely to be discord. So use your seichel and don't put yourself or the other members in your family in a situation where they're going to cause this discord. Try to be thoughtful. But then he ends by saying this, and I think it's fascinating. How does the pasuk end? Well, I've spent time explaining the first part, mitzvah of showing your parents respect and reverence. We spent some time talking about the second part, that everybody has to observe the laws of Shabbos, but we haven't spoken about Ani Hashem Elokeichem. So when you read this pasuk in its simplest form, it sounds like Ani Hashem Elokeichem is there to buttress and support the idea of not listening to your parents. If your parents say do something, don't listen. Why? I'm Hashem. I'm Hashem. I'm the ultimate authority. Don't cave. You got to hold the line when it comes to doing my mitzvahs. You got to hold the line. Rabbi Gottlieb suggests, well, maybe there's an alternate explanation as to why Ani Hashem Elokeichem is at the end of this pasuk. What could it be? He says, I am Hashem, and I'm the same Hashem who in a few more psukim, which we may get to, I'm the one who also told you v'ahavta l'recha kamocha. I'm the one who also told you about behaving with derech eretz. I'm the one who also told you about showing love to the people. And so what he says is maybe the end of this pasuk, Ani Hashem Elokeichem, is there not to enforce the authoritative nature of God who insists that you submit to his authority. I'm not saying that's not true, but I'm saying maybe the insertion of Ani Hashem Elokeichem in this situation is in recognition of the fact that according to the way Rashi sets it up, there sometimes are tensions. That parents sometimes ask kids to do things that kids say, "This is I can't do it. I don't want to do it," and you know right away that there's going to be fighting. So how do we resolve yourselves? Ani Hashem Elokeichem. No, that doesn't mean, yes, the authoritative voice wins. It means, Ani Hashem Elokeichem, and I've told you about v'ahavta l'recha kamocha. Let's bring down the rhetoric. Let's be more embracing. Let's try to be more understanding. Let's try to be more compassionate. Let's try to put ourselves in somebody else's situation. Let's try not to scream at each other. Let's try to listen to each other. Let's try to hold our breath for a second so that we are not always on the attack. Says Rabbi Gottlieb, maybe that's the message of Ani Hashem Elokeichem. And while it's probably the context for that message is this pasuk, but truthfully, it's probably true for many other situations as well. Okay. Staying within this parsha, this parak even, I want to move forward. This is parak or Parshat Kedoshim, the 19th parak is by far my favorite parak in all of Chumash. It's one section after the other of the foundation of ethics in Jewish life. And it's so rich, it's so beautiful, it's so empowering, it's so encouraging. And maybe one year, that's what we should just study. Just go through this parak. It could take us at least a year, maybe even more. Anyways, so I am going to skip to Pasuk Tedvav 15. Here's the pasuk. Lo tasu aval b'mishpat, lo tisa pnei dal, v'lo te'adar pnei gadol, v'tzedek tishpot amitecha. You shall not commit a perversion of justice. You shall not favor the poor, and you shall not honor the great. With righteousness shall you judge your fellow. B'tzedek tishpot amitecha. With righteousness, you should judge your fellow. So, b'tzedek tishpot amitecha, with righteousness, Rashi, interestingly enough, looks at this verse and he realizes that this verse, these three words, b'tzedek tishpot amitecha, seem a little bit out of place because the first part of this verse seems to be talking to a judge. Do not do perversion in court and justice. Do not show unnecessary favoritism to people who come before you when you're rendering a judgment. And you should judge your friend justly. Well, you shouldn't have any friends in court, meaning you're a judge. You're not recognizing who's your friend and who's not. You have to be totally objective. So why would the Torah say, b'tzedek tishpot amitecha? So Rashi says that this word means dan l'kaf zchut. You should judge a person by giving them the benefit of the doubt. It's a moment of judgment, giving the benefit of the doubt, which therefore means that giving the benefit of the doubt is itself some sort of commandment. Interesting idea. Giving the benefit of the doubt is not just an advisable way of dealing with people. It may in fact be a commandment in and of itself. But I want to share an idea with you about this Rashi. Judge a person with kaf zchut. Hevi dan et chavercha l'kaf zchut. Judge your neighbor, your friend, by giving them the benefit of the doubt. So there's a story that takes place in Tanakh about David HaMelech, following his episode with Bathsheba and how he sent Bathsheba's husband to the front lines of a war, anticipating that he would get killed in battle, thereby freeing up Bathsheba for David to marry because she was a married woman. So the Navi Natan became aware of this, and went to David Melech and gave him the following parable and asked him, or gave him a following case, didn't call it a parable, and asked him how to rule in the case. What was the case? There were two people in the city. One was wealthy and one was struggling, was not wealthy, was poor. And the rich person had many cattle and sheep, obviously, but the poor person only had one small sheep, and that's all that they had. Somebody came to the city and needed some food, but the rich person really didn't want to take any cattle from his own stock. So what he took that one sheep from the poor person in order to provide the meal for the person. So Natan and Avi said, what do you think should happen? What's the right thing to do? So according to the way this is described in Shmuel, David got very upset. He got very angry, and he said, are you like the person, this rich person who took the sheep of the poor person? He is a ben mavet. He should be liable to be put to death. Natan and Navi heard what David said and disclosed to David that he was talking about him, that he did exactly that. He took Uriah and he sent him to the front lines, as it were, like this little sheep, in order for him to benefit from Bathsheba's relationship. So, why was that story significant? Natan says, you're that man. You are that man. I gave you that story, and what did you do? You judged the story. But in truth, David, you just judged yourself. You just passed judgment on yourself. You just said what your judgment should be. So now, let's go back to this pasuk. B'tzedek tishpot amitecha. You should give a person the benefit of the doubt. Why? Because actually, in some ways, you're judging yourself. You will be judged in the same way that you judge others. Midah keneged midah. That's the way it works in heaven. If you're the type of person that refused to give anybody a break, then that's the way in which Hashem is going to treat you. I will reflect to you what you see, the way you judge other people. That was the whole purpose of Natan HaNavi's little scenario with David HaMelech. David, this is how you judge this other person, so maybe that is exactly precisely the way you should be judged. And then, of course, where the Navi tells us that, in the book of Shmuel tells us how contrite David HaMelech became after doing that. So we need to be very careful before we judge people. Maybe you've heard this. Don't judge another person until what? Until you get to the place where he's at. You don't know what other people's circumstances are. Before you pass judgment, you need to know. So be very careful before you pass judgment, lest judgment will be passed upon you in the same manner that you did it in somebody else. And maybe that should scare us and shake us up a little, because sometimes we're really harsh. Sometimes we can be very judgmental of other people, looking and not understanding what's going on. Dan et chavircha lechav zchut. So in Pirkei Avot, this also appears. Yoshua ben Prachia says it slightly differently. He says, excuse me. Dan et kol adam, kol ha'adam l'kaf zchut. He says, judge everybody with the benefit of the doubt. So it's very clever how he said this. And sometimes we read the Hebrew and we just skip over it. Dan et kol ha'adam l'kaf zchut. So most of us, myself included, say, well, judge everybody by giving the benefit of the doubt. But that's literally not what it means. I'll say it again in Hebrew. Dan et kol ha'adam l'kaf zchut literally means judge the entire person with the benefit of the doubt. Judge the entire person? What does that mean? Could be Rabbi Shua ben Prachia is saying something deeply profound, which is this. You don't know everybody's life. You don't know what's going on behind the scenes. You don't know what goes on in anybody's house when they close the front door. You don't know. So because you don't know, you can't judge the entirety of the situation. You can't judge the whole person. You can only judge a little slice that you can see, that little frame that you took your video with on your camera. That's all you saw. That's all you know. If you think that's enough to make a judgment about a person, it's not. Danet kol ha'adam. You need to know everything about that person. You need to know the circumstances. You need to know what's going on. We see this in schools all the time. Little boys and girls come to school and they're upset. They misbehave. And what are they, bad children? No, you don't know that mom and dad had a big fight before the kid left for school and it just disrupted his whole world and turned him upside down. You don't know that. So this kid is acting out in your class and you think somehow he's a bad boy or bad girl. He's not. This little boy or girl is suffering because he doesn't know what's going to happen when he comes home. Is he going to have a home? Is his mother going to be there? Is his father going to be there? You don't know. And yet you need to make a judgment about how to proceed. So it's really a lesson in humility. Before you do that, understand that the way in which we judge is exactly the way in which we will be judged. I think of which one of the few D-Ray Torah that I have left I should say, and which one I should leave out. Okay, I'm going to say this one. One of the greatest psukim in all of Torah, I think, is V'ahavta l'recha kamocha. Everybody knows that one. V'ahavta l'recha kamocha, it's chapter 19, verse 18. Lo tichon v'lo titor b'nei amecha v'ahavta l'recha kamocha ani Hashem. You shall not take revenge and you shall not bear a grudge against the members of your people. You shall love your fellow as yourself. I am Hashem. Rashi quotes this, and he quotes what I think everybody knows. He quotes Amar Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva said, Zeklal Gadol b'Torah. This is an extremely important principle in the Torah. So one of the commentaries in Rashi called the Siftei Chachamim asks, or says, in this mitzvah of Ha'ahavta l'recha kamocha, b'mitzvah zo nichlal kol Torah. The entire Torah is included in this mitzvah. Kamo she'amar Hillel HaZaken, in the same way that in Masechet Shabbat, Hillel HaZaken, when asked by the non-Jew who was interested in converting to Judaism, but only if he could be taught the entire Torah while standing on one leg, to which Hillel says to him, okay, you ready? I'm going to do that. Lift up your leg. You ready? Here it is. I'm telling you now the entire Torah. What is hateful unto you, do not do to somebody else. This Rashi, the Gemara tells us, so Rabbi Hillel says, I just told you the whole Torah. This is it. Everything else is commentary on this principle. Don't do to somebody else what you don't want to be done to you, which is the negative formulation of exactly this idea of V'ahavta l'recha kamocha. Rabbi Akiva says, this is it, the most important principle in all of Torah. So Rabbi Akiva and Hillel are the two sides of exactly the same coin. Rabbi Akiva said it in the positive. Hillel expressed it in the negative. But Rashi had a question. What was Rashi's question in the Gemara? Rashi's question in the Gemara, where the story about Hillel happens, is, well, there's so many mitzvahs in the Torah. There's 613 mitzvahs in the Torah. This is only one of them. So what is it that made Rabbi Akiva think that this was the most important principle in the Torah? He didn't talk about Shabbos, he didn't talk about Kashrus, he didn't talk about so many other things, Yetzias Mitzrayim, Yontif, Rosh Hashanah. Why this one? Why this? What makes V'ahavta l'recha kamocha more important? So Rashi on that piece of Gemara says, well, a couple of possibilities. Because most of the mitzvahs in the Torah, most of the mitzvahs quantitatively, actually deal with mitzvahs bein adam l'chaveiro. That's the majority of mitzvahs between people and each other, how we have to govern our relationships. So therefore, it's not an inappropriate comment to say, yes, the majority of mitzvahs are bein adam l'chaveiro, v'ahavta l'recha kamocha, don't do what other people what you don't want. It's most of the Torah, so it's not an inaccurate statement to say that. That's possibility number one. Possibility number two is when it says v'ahavta l'recha kamocha, you shall love your neighbor. Well, the word for neighbor here is re'acha. Re'ah is a beloved person. Maybe re'ah isn't really only talking about human beloved, but maybe the beloved with the capital T, the capital B. We're talking about God. V'ahavta l'recha, your beloved, the one who really loves you more than any other force in the world. God gave you life. That's the re'ah we're talking about. Love God like you love yourself. Therefore, rendering this perhaps the most important mitzvah in the Torah. The Arizal, and some people do this every morning. If anybody's davening from the Arizal Siddur, or actually davening from the Tehillas Hashem, those who daven Nusach Chabad do it this way because they daven with the Arizal's Nusach as well. He says the following: Sheish Lamar Kol Boker Lifnei Atfilah, to recite every morning before you start davening, and it's written in the Siddur. This is during the very beginning of davening, to recite what Hareini Mekabel Alai Mitzvah, to say V'ahavta Recha Kamocha. I accept upon myself the fulfillment of the mitzvah V'ahavta Recha Kamocha. The Arizal said you should be saying that every day, 7 days a week for the rest of your life. At the very beginning of davening, Acharei ani mekabel alai. I'm accepting upon myself mitzvah asay, the positive commandment, V'ahavta Recha Kamocha. So why? What does V'ahavta Recha Kamocha have anything to do with davening? I get it's a mitzvah, it's a nice thing to do, but why did the Arizal deliberately insert the recitation of that as part of davening? So the Arizal explained, because no one human being in our generation has the ability to concentrate completely, totally, 100% throughout 100% of the davening, from the beginning to the end. We can't. We may want to, we may try to, but I know that at some point, somewhere along the davening, like for a minute, maybe less, my mind wanders. Yeah, that's true for everybody. Nobody can have an entire tefillah which is completely, wholly, entirely dedicated and aware only to the relationship with Hashem. Everybody has their portion, but nobody has it entirely. But my portion of concentration is different than your portion. So all of us together create the perfect tefillah. I can't daven a full tefillah, but your tefillah and his tefillah and her tefillah and our tefillah, that creates the perfect tefillah. That's the klal gadol b'Torah. That's the great unity, the great composite collection of all of our neshamas. That's what Rabbi Akiva was saying. When we are all together, that creates it. And when the Arizal said, I'm going to say at the beginning of davening, what I'm really saying, in addition to, yes, I want to create the positive relationship with all my neighbors and my friends and my community, I'm also saying that I know that my tefillah may be deficient, but everybody in this room, everybody in the minyan, everybody in the community that's davening, together we create that perfect davening. So we're not perfect. Nobody's perfect. We need each other. And that's why one of the reasons I love this Parsha so much is because when you read this Parsha, look at all the different mitzvahs, and when you have the chance on Shabbos or before Shabbos to read through it, you'll see just how diverse these mitzvot are and how much they cover things that have to do with personal relationships, with people, with God, with sort of ethical behavior, how you relate to your wife, how you relate to your children, how you relate to the land, how you relate to God. There's so much here. And there's so much for us to learn, so much for us to master, so much for us to aspire to. And I think at the end, that's pretty much what we're aspiring to. Kedoshim to you. That's how the Parsha begins. You should be holy. How do you get to be holy? You get to be holy by aspiring. You get to be holy by trying. You get to be holy by saying, I think I can be better. I think I can be a higher level person. I'm not my best version of myself yet. Here at Son, may Hashem give each and every one of us the ability, the power, the strength, the determination, the will, the excitement to see ourselves as a better version, and then taking the steps necessary to do that. So thank you, everybody, for joining. I just want a heads up. So we're going to have a shiur next week, but the week after, May 21st, Rochelle and I and our daughter Eliana are going on the Living Legacy trip to Poland. We're very excited about this. It's going to be, I think, a pretty intense experience, but we will be in Poland on Tuesday, May 21st. So as much as I would like to try to see if I'm giving a shiur from Poland via Zoom, I don't think I'm going to be able to do that because I don't know where I'm going to be and whether or not there's going to be Wi-Fi. So I'll share some of my experiences when I get back, but I just want everybody to know next week, Mir Hashem, we're on. The week after, the 21st of May, we will not be on because I'll be away. So thank you, everybody. I'm happy to chat and to talk and to listen. Please feel free to unmute yourselves if you can.
I never got that message till you called me. Then I got Winthrop to send it to me.
Okay, Tito, which message?
The message that you're gonna be on a different channel.
Oh, okay. Well, I think it's in the email where it says new Zoom link. I'll send you the email that Nicole sent out on Sunday.
Yeah, this message I did not get.
Okay. I will send out the email to you and you can see it. This is the email every week when they send out the weekly email, it'll have this email link. A Zoom link.
Ralph Winthrop just sent it to me. That's why I was.
Okay, I will.
The beginning.
Sorry, I'm sorry for any inconvenience.
No inconvenience, but I'm sorry to miss part of.
Yeah, I understand.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, guys. Have a wonderful week, everybody. A healthy week, a safe week.
Have a wonderful trip. Have a safe trip.
That's not this week. I'll see you next week, but the week after that, God willing. Thank you very much for your good wishes. I really, really appreciate that. Okay,
Thank you for
friend.
this beautiful shiur.
Pardon?
I said, thank you for this beautiful shiur.
Oh, thank you, Charlie, for being here. That means a lot.
Thank you
Really.
very much. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you, Tito. It's always a pleasure that you're joining. Okay, bye, everybody.
Thank you.